What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Formula America podcast. Still the number one, undisputed, uncontested Formula One podcast for the American fan, by the American fan. We're your hosts. I'm Kurt. That's Dylan. And today we're going to talk about all of the craziness that has happened in this past week, all of the musical chairs going on within Formula One, which by itself isn't anything out of the ordinary. But this week it's been a little bit special because it's not the normal players that you would see moving around during the offseason. Dylan, this has been a wild week.
The Instagram feed just blows up with F1 breaking, F1 breaking, F1 breaking. Like, oh my gosh, what is going on over there?
It's just back to back to back. So it's crazy that, you know, normally during an off season you have a lot of changes going on, a lot of driver changes. But it's like this week.
I wouldn't even say there's usually that many driver changes. I think that the lineup has, for the past 3 years, been set by the end of the season. Like,
yeah, but
off season
whenever
really kind of,
yeah, it's boring.
It's boring. Usually, you hear more about like tracks getting on and off the track or on and off the calendar and anything. You don't generally have these. I mean, maybe one or two moves, but this week has been insanity on the moons.
So what I think happened, I think that all the team leadership and management got together and they were like, you know what, we're tired of these drivers always making the headlines. It's like, we're going to do something for ourselves this time. We're going to play the musical chairs this time. Because it was wild. Man. It's like, once the Ferrari announcement came out, it was just like a trickle effect after that.
Yeah, and it's. I wonder how long it's been in the works. Because Ferrari fired Matteo Binotto a week after Abu Dhabi, and everyone saw that coming from miles away.
Yep.
But so Ferrari didn't.
I read in a pretty interesting article that kind of alluded to the fact that Ferrari had been hinting around at replacing Binotto since late last year, 2021.
Yeah.
Which, you know, if so, I mean, you could see back then, you know, they were still making some bonehead calls. So maybe that was like, you know, the last straw this year, and they finally got rid of him.
Yeah, it's been super interesting. We all saw that he needed to go. Is pretty clear. I mean, he wasn't even at like the last three races. He had some other guys sitting in for him. You know, I think we saw that come in, but Ferrari said they weren't going to announce anyone until next year. So I wonder if the fast announcement coming out like just kicked everything into gear.
I think so. There's some pretty interesting stuff that I found out about some of the other ones as far as timeline goes that we'll get into. But how about this? Let's start and talk about all of the movements as a whole, and then let's break down each one individually and the potential ramifications that each one brings along with it.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's just a domino effect going down, starting with Ferrari.
All right, so starting with that, what do we got? What happened there?
All right, so Matteo Binotto, team principal, got fired 1 week after Abu Dhabi, like we said. And then they brought in Fred Vasseur, who was Alfa Romeo / Sauber's team principal. That was, you know, I think people kind of saw that come in. It was definitely hinted at, and he was a good fit for it. But again, you know, I don't know if Alfa Romeo was expecting to lose their team principal quite as fast when Ferrari said they weren't going to announce anything until next year. So Vasseur goes out the door, leaving Alfa Romeo / Sauber hanging in the wind. So up steps Andreas Seidel, who was McLaren's team principal. And that was, I think, a big move. I don't think McLaren was really wanting that to happen. They had him for like long-term planning, bring them back around. Like, that's definitely making some waves. He's got some past with Sauber / Audi, though, as well. So now McLaren was flapping in the wind with no team principal. So they promoted from within, though. They brought Andrea Stella, who was Seidel's number 2, if you will. He was a technical director. It was, you know, they promoted from within. And that kind of ended the daisy chain happening. And then Jost Capito left Williams. Just he up and was like, deuces, I'm out. And so Williams still has nobody to replace them.
Yeah, so that's, you know, there's a lot that happened there, and it's crazy to see, like, whenever one movement is announced and the trickle effect that comes with that. Even like with drivers, like this year when it was Seb announced his retirement, and then Alonso announced he was moving, and then it's just like bam, 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 right? You know, one after another.
Yep.
But so Ferrari, that's kind of a big one right there. You know, Matteo Binotto had been with that team since 1995, basically worked his way up from, almost a mechanic essentially, and up into the team principal. That's pretty wild to me. But another thing about that though is like Ferrari team principal has got to be one of the hardest jobs in all of Formula One.
Yeah, there's so much weight on your shoulders. I mean, Ferrari owns like 1/3 of the FIA, doesn't it? Like,
Stefano Domenicali is he's the president, I think, of the FIA, or he's running the show right now. Former Ferrari team principal.
Yeah, and I mean, when you go up onto the podiums at the end of the race, all the podiums have Ferrari across it. Like, Ferrari is the face of Formula One. Like, to be sitting in that chair,
right? That's
some. Not to mention, I mean, to be a Ferrari fan is to be called tifosi, which means the faithful. Like, there's a lot riding in that seat. You got a lot of people watching.
I was listening to an interview with Toto Wolff earlier this week, and he was saying basically, like, I think the way he worded it was the Italian media and the Italian people will write you up, but they will also write you down. Basically alluding to the fact that, like, you're more than a team principal. Like, you are leading almost the Italian nation to an extent, right? Yeah. And especially with the media, like, if you're doing good, you're going to be a hero. But the minute the success starts to go away, then all of a sudden you're, like, public enemy number one in Italy. And so I think that's one of those positions that comes with a lot of responsibility. So we got
absolutely. And that's hard when you're trying to do a rebuild year, when you're trying, like, there's so much optics you have to play into to, like, tell the crowd, hey, don't fire me this year. I've got a 5-year plan, right? Like, we got to get to years 2 and 3. Don't fire me in year 1. Come on. Like, it'd be like someone trying to fill the shoes of Nick Saban, right? Like, you just have this huge, so many people watching, and it goes fast. I mean, UT, University of Texas football, same way. I mean, I don't think we've had a head coach that lasted more than like 3 years in the past decade since Mac Brown was there. Like, you get a couple of years, and then Texas just turns on you, and you're out. Like,
hey, I'm a Florida State fan ever since Bobby Bowden left. Actually, after Bobby Bowden, we had oh damn, I can't remember his name right now.
On the spot, you're gonna bring it up.
I know, right?
Fumble.
Put me down. Anyways, so we've had a string of coaches as well. But so going into Ferrari, we've got the Frenchman Frédéric Vasseur, or however you say it.
Vasseur.
So he's actually got Mr. Vasseur has actually a pretty, like, long and storied history as far as, in racing.
He's got a good resume, good reputation.
Yeah, he was the former team principal for Renault for a year. And then apparently he left there in 2016. He did the one season and then had some irreconcilable differences with Cyril Abiteboul. He said they had some differences in opinion on the way the team should be run. So he resigned from there. And then after that went to Sauber, where he was CEO and managing director and also, by the way, team principal. So I think that's a huge loss for them.
Huge loss. And I think it's important on the other side, Matteo Binotto, there's been a lot of politics played on the Ferrari side of who's been team principal. And this is Vasseur coming over is the first time that the chairman and CEO of Ferrari have given their support to the team principal. It wasn't a power play to bring Matteo Binotto in like when he came in. Like, this is the first one that he's got a lot of support, and this is the first outside hire in over 15 years for Ferrari.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, they do. They're very Italian heavy. Like,
yes.
It's surprising almost to see that they hired a Frenchman as their team principal. But it's almost like
Frenchman.
We've tried this for so long and it hasn't been working.
Yeah. But I mean, that's got to say something about what's happening at Ferrari right now. They're hiring a Frenchman to come in. Like, there's got to be some sad faces.
They see, for sure. But they also see, like, what they've been doing has not been working. But one thing that's pretty interesting about this move, right, is you look at Fred Vasseur, his ties to Charles Leclerc. So he actually started, and I'm talking about Vasseur here, he actually formed the ART racing teams. I think it's like the Asia racing team or whatever. And they did GP3, GP2, stuff like that. And Charles Leclerc raced for them and won the GP3 championship for them in 2016. And then, fast forward to Alfa Romeo, Sauber, and that's when Charles Leclerc came into Formula One. So he was very instrumental in basically like cultivating Charles Leclerc's career and then bringing him to Formula One as well. So they've got a history. So now, you know, he's going to Ferrari. I mean, potentially, you know, that might be pretty good for Charles Leclerc. You know, I don't know if you're going to come in day one and be like, hey, Charles, he's our guy. I think it's pretty obvious that he's the number one driver.
Yeah.
But I still would be kind of surprised if he came in and, like, you know, be like, hey, everything goes to Charles Leclerc. But I think it's good for him that he has that tie to him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to help with confidence in the team. You know, we talked about it last week when your team engineers are calling down to the driver for what he thinks that they should do for strategy. Like that's got to shake your confidence in your whole team really hard. I think more than anything, it's probably a good confidence boost for Leclerc.
Oh, for sure. All right, so Frederick Vasseur obviously came from Alfa Romeo Sauber, and replacing him, well, not really replacing him, but coming in there is Andreas Seidel. Now, I think it's also worth noting that Alfa Romeo is kind of, or Sauber, and we use those interchangeably. For people that haven't been around a lot, Sauber is the actual like racing team. Alfa Romeo is the title sponsor, basically. Alfa Romeo's leaving, and Audi's coming in 2026 as a new title sponsor for that team. So they're going through a lot of changes right now. And Audi's already made some pretty big promises. Like, they're already saying they're going to come in. New
engines.
Yep. Essentially, like, they're saying they're going to come in and wreak havoc in Formula One. So they're making a lot of changes. And actually, one of the speculations that Fred Vasseur was so eager to maybe move on to Ferrari is, like, he saw that there's a lot of changes coming down the line, and Audi would most likely want to instill their own person in that position.
Understandably.
So I think it's yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a regime change. So now
but
that's
kind of what they did with Seidel.
In.
I mean, Seidel Seidel's been a part of Sauber before. He's been a part of Audi.
Yeah.
He's helped with those programs. I mean, they kind of just got their inside hire through years ahead of time. Like, they were going to definitely do a regime change and bring a guy in when they took over. Well, they just brought a guy in now 4 years before takeover. Like,
exactly. And so the interesting thing about that with Seidel is I was reading through like his history and his contracts, specifically with McLaren. Apparently his contract wasn't set to expire until 2025. And so he had apparently been talking with Zach and was like, hey, you know, I'm going to be moving over to Audi. So that's not been the secret. But then once all these moves started happening, all of a sudden it's like, hey, remember where I was going to wait out my contract? He's like, well, actually, I'm going to leave now. So
how much do you think that
leave.
Buyout was?
Oof. I don't know. They just bought out Danny, and now they had to buy out another one.
Yeah.
So Andreas Seidel, McLaren team principal, and now he's moving over to the Sauber CEO. Still leaving a hole there for who's going to be the new team principal of Sauber.
Yep.
So a lot of speculation on that one. I've actually heard people throwing Jos Capito's name in there. But
we'll get to that. But as we were talking about before, like, he came out of retirement for Williams. Like, I don't know if he wants to be team boss now.
Yeah, I think he's done. I don't think he's going to do that. But we'll see. It hasn't been announced yet. There's still, a little bit of time. I would think that they want to get somebody in that position fairly soon, though. So hopefully, probably by early January, we should know something.
For sure.
So interesting thing with Andreas Seidel, though, is he's actually a former team principal for the World Endurance Championships with Porsche, and they won multiple championships there, Le Mans championships. So he's proven, maybe not so much in the Formula One world. He was only at McLaren for 3 years, I think. 2019 he came over. But he's got race experience, and he's a proven race winner. So I think that's pretty exciting. And to see whoever he brings on as the team principal will be pretty fun to watch too.
And you saw what he was doing with McLaren last year. I mean, they were going from a run-of-the-mill mid-team pack to moving up. They started competing with, they weren't a top 3 team by any means, but they were best of the rest probably. And then this year definitely kind of took a step backwards. But Seidel had long-term plans to improve that team back to a championship contender. And I think you can kind of see that in the fact that the McLaren CEO Zach Brown hired within, he basically hired Seidel's right-hand man and brought him up to continue to run the same exact, plan. So I think that says a lot for who Seidel is, what his long-term visions are, and what kind of team principal he is.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting that they hired from within, and basically somebody that maybe kind of like his protege.
Yeah.
Who on that, Andreas Stella, very similarly named to Andreas Seidel. So that guy, somebody that I didn't know much about until I started reading into it, and I found out some pretty interesting stuff. Do you know that he was actually at Ferrari for 15 years, and he was the race engineer for both Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso?
Whoa! No, I did not know that.
Which to me is, pretty crazy. And then, 15 years at Ferrari came over.
Being Kimi Räikkönen's team engineer is not much. Kimi just tells you to shut up and he knows what to do.
Is just sit there and be silent. Leave me alone. I know what to do.
I had no idea.
So he came. Yeah, he came over to McLaren in 2015 as the head of race operations, and then basically worked his way up, performance director, and then director of racing director after that, and now he's moving on up to team principal, which is interesting. But man, I gotta say, if I'm Lando Norris right now, I might be kind of nervous. I don't know.
Yep. They talked about that because they got Lando Norris to sign that 5-year contract with McLaren. And they talked about how Seidel was a huge part of that. That because Seidel was going to be with the team for so long, that gave Lando the confidence to sign that long contract. Now, I wonder if you're, and this is F1. Like, people get bought out and moved all the time. The length of contract is almost a joke anyway. It's just a way to make more money if you leave early buying it out. But I don't know if he's nervous or not. It's kind of a interesting.
I don't know, man. I think you kind of have to be. Like, the way I'm looking at it is Lando Norris he's a good driver. He needs a car under him that can get him to the top. And I think that, for a little bit there's this promise that McLaren is going to become that car. But now, with so much instability in the team, like, he's probably looking at it like, well, if Andreas left the team, like, is he seeing something that maybe I don't see? And then, once this contract is over, if McLaren's not able to give him a car that is capable of winning races, I'm thinking he's out for sure, and which is going to be interesting.
But going where?
Exactly, because if you look at the time frame, I think it's 2025 as his contract is up. Like, you've got potentially Sergio Perez. Yeah, and you look at the other people that are going to be moving. You got potentially Sergio Perez. I mean, what if Lewis Hamilton retires, like moving to Mercedes maybe? What does Audi do? Is Audi going to drop a fat check in front of him and bring him over there, back with Andreas Seidel again? So he's got a lot to think about, and I think that McLaren really needs to get their act together if they want to keep Lando, because it seems like they're trying to build the team around Lando. But without that car, he's not going to stay.
And Lando's young, too. I mean, he looks young, for one. He looks like he's 14. It's really hard to see an F1 driver in him with how young he looks. But he's also just actually young. To be the senior driver and building a team around someone at that age, that's, and he's never even won a race.
Yeah. It's come close.
Close.
Sochi. I'll never forget that Sochi race. You remember that one in the rain?
Bad tire choice. Started to rain on that back corner.
It was heartbreaking when he spun out, and then you see Lewis Hamilton come in. He's like, I got to come in, boys. I was like, no.
Just defeated.
Oh, man, you were almost there. All right, so beyond that, Jost Capito. And because he didn't leave by himself either. He took
the technical director with him.
What's that guy's name? It's like FX
it was a long,
something?
It was a long one. I didn't write it down.
Yeah.
I was hoping you weren't going to ask. I was just going to say the technical director. I'm not going to remember that name.
So it's interesting that they both left at the same time, and I'm kind of curious what's going on there because nothing's been announced yet.
Nothing.
It's like Darlington Capital is like, so I think they said we'll announce it in due course or something like that. And it's like, well, you don't have a leader right now.
Yeah. And your team's last. Got 8 points total last season. Not a great time. You've got 2 young drivers. You've got it is, and that might have been why Yost was like, dude, peace, I'm out. Like this is for the birds. I'm not coming back out of retirement to be last place constantly. Like
he's like, I'm supposed to be sitting on a beach right now, not picking up the pieces.
And the pieces keep falling out. Just it's definitely not a good sign for Williams. If who is it? DeVries that signed with Williams? No, it was
no, Sargent.
Logan Sargent. If you're Logan Sargent, you're coming in, you're ecstatic, you're going to be in F1, and then all of this is happening, and you're with Williams. You've just got to be like,
yeah, at least I'm in F1.
At least I'm in F1. I'll be competing
That's what you gotta
for
tell yourself.
19th place every time.
Well, like we talked about before, if you're in a team like that, you're not fighting for wins, but you need to be fighting against your teammate. Like as long as you're consistently outperforming your teammate, kind of like George Russell did, then you look what happened
Kevin
to him.
Magnussen did over Mick this year.
Yeah, and look at Mick. Oh, speaking of Mick, that's one of the only driver move that we've had this week.
Do you like that
Mick
segue?
Schumacher.
I kind of just teed that up for you perfectly.
That was beautiful. Just so we got Mick Schumacher signing on as the Mercedes reserve driver, which to me I think is an awesome move. Probably better than racing for Haas, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think you could have asked for a better move under the tutelage of Toto, Lewis. I mean, I don't. George is probably schoolboy enough to play really nice with him and just kind of say mean things behind his back occasionally. But, I think the other side of that, Mick's a competitor, but Mick also just strikes me as like an incredibly genuine, nice person.
Yep.
So I think if you're George Russell, you still have that absolute drive, that fight, that want to compete against Lewis Hamilton and do all of that. But it's probably – I don't think George is going to feel like Sergio with Danny Rick sitting behind him. Like I'm sure, you've got a little bit less worry if Mick Schumacher's sitting behind you because I don't think – Mick Schumacher's not the honey badger. He's not going to be poisoning your water to get you to sit out so you get the car.
But I mean, if you look at some of the other reserve drivers, specifically Nick DeVries, right? Like he was a Mercedes reserve driver, and now he's got a full-time seat.
Yep.
So I think that, you're definitely going to sit there. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to get to, really get ingrained with a very good team. Mercedes, they've already kind of shown their loyalty, like with George Russell and all that. So I mean,
with Valtteri,
potentially. Yeah, exactly. So potentially if he gets in there and makes a good impression and starts actually learning some things and getting some good takeaways, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You might see him, if not in a Mercedes car, maybe in one of the, other midfield teams here in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good move for Mick. I think it's a mature move, although I don't think he had much of a choice, but I think it's a good move for Mercedes. I think Mick is, he was showing some promise, some constant forward movement. I mean, the name Schumacher, Michael Schumacher was with Mercedes from 2010 to 2012. Like, I think that it's just good PR. I think it's a good move. I think it's strategic. All around. I am very interested to see, Mick was in a Haas, which is just, it's one of the back of the pack cars. It has been for the past few years. I'd be really interested to see Mick get a drive in that Mercedes and how much higher up the list he scores just based on car performance. Like when you don't have an incredibly unstable Haas car underneath you that spins out if the wind turns 5 degrees. Like, does he improve greatly? I mean, I'd imagine so. It's a much better car, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how this works out. Hopefully he'll get some good FP1 drives and maybe some good testing. But yeah, I'm excited to see that. All right, so that's all of our movements for this week. Pretty crazy. Normally you don't see that much, especially from the team leadership.
Never that much from team principals, I feel.
No, not at all. So I'm excited to see, what happens from here. I think that, most people are probably locked in now. And now we just got to get into the car launches, which I saw today that Aston Martin has already announced their car launch date. So interested to see how these cars are. And once we get to practice finally, testing, to see, you know, kind of how the order shakes out there. That'll be pretty interesting to see.
What would, all the cars are being launched into February, right? Like February 23rd through the 27th-ish, somewhere in there?
I'm not actually sure. As far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure only Aston Martin has announced it.
Shouldn't be too drastic of changes. We'll do a podcast on like the technical changes from 22 to 23, but unless you can eyeball millimeter differences in floorboards and whatnot, it's going to look largely like the same car.
Yep. Yeah, so we've got Aston Martin announces theirs on February 13th, the AMR 23. Which still, man, I told you when we were at that Mexico race, that to me is like one of the most beautiful cars. I just love the color on that car.
Yeah, it's not my favorite color. I mean, like, it looked a lot better in person than it did on the TV. It's very glossy. It wasn't my favorite, though.
Oh, I liked it. And I liked the testing, the post-season testing when they stripped it down with all the stickers and everything off of it.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, I was always impressed. I mean, the Red Bull's a pretty car, but when you see that matte coloring in person, I think the Red Bull's a hard one to compete with on looks.
Especially the way that orange pops against that.
Yes. Although that black Mercedes,
that one was still one of my favorites. So beautiful.
That car was sexy.
They should have stuck with that one.
All right.
I liked it way better than the silver one.
Yeah, but everyone complained about how hot it was.
Yeah, but it looks cool.
It looked, yeah. You always got to look cool first.
There you go. You can still wear your white suit.
But yeah, so I mean, we got a couple more as team bosses get announced, as Williams sorts their stuff out. We'll definitely do episodes on those and what they mean, who's moving there, keep everyone up to date on that stuff. Got more podcasts coming up, technical changes, tracks for 2023, what's going to happen. So stay tuned.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this one, and look for us on the next one.
Absolutely. Hit that like and subscribe button. Comment.
Hey, there you
tag
go.
your friends. Start sharing.
Good job.